Says the Hangout's on the air, so I guess we are live. And this is Ed Dyer, and this is the TWIS Minion Science Island Hangout, having all kinds of problems. Hopefully this thing will last for a while. Hopefully the internet gods will help us out. Joining me, as usual, is Dale Liebrecht.
Hey, Ed.
Canada, good old Canada. How you doing, Dale?
I'm great because I'm eating popcorn.
Yes, nutritional popcorn. Also joining us is Kyle Meacham from Minnesota, who is just doing his laundry. How you doing, Kyle?
Good.
That's good. We got a bunch of stories. We got bunches of stories to go over. There's two in the world of bionic prosthetics and implants. Two really great stories about a couple of Austrians who have a robotic prosthetic hand they can control with their mind. And if it will work, there's a really neat video that shows just how well it works. We've got another really great story about a man who had lost his vision, and using a bionic implant by the company called Second Sight, he is able to get a kind of vision. He can't make out shapes. He can only make out kind of shadows. But, you know, this is a first step. And hopefully, I'm sure, future generations of the product will perfect it better. Got a couple of stories about genetics, our friend genetics. One talks about the epigenome orchestrating embryonic development. And another one about viral remnants controlling our genome. And a couple other stories. Let's jump right into them. And the first story, if I can find it. Well, the link work. I have to apologize. I'm not in Chrome right now. I had to open the Hangout in Instant Messenger, so I'm not really too familiar with how these links will work. One of you guys, Dale, could you hit the link on this story and see if you can get to? Are you in Chrome?
I'm using Safari. Bionic reconstruction?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
I'll go for it.
It works. I'll read the first two stories, and then when we get to the business of genetics, I'll let you take over, Dale.
Okay.
And I really hope this. You know, I got a window for the video. Let's see if I can figure out the screen share.
I see it.
You see it?
Yep, I see the screen share.
Okay. First, let me read a little bit of the story to give you some background. Let me find it. Oh, here we go. Okay, so you have three Austrian men became the first in the world to undergo a new technique called bionic reconstruction, enabling them to use a robotic prosthetic hand controlled by their mind. All three men suffered for many years with something called brachial plexus injuries and poor hand function as a result of motor vehicle and climbing accidents. The new technique combines selective nerve and muscle transfers, elective amputation, and replacement with an advanced robotic prosthesis. Okay. Following comprehensive rehabilitation, the technique restored a high level of function in all three recipients, and if you can watch that video, it's amazing how well it works. In effect, brachial or something like that, plexus evolution, boy, I butchered that, injuries represent an inner amputation, irreversibly separating the hand from neural control. Existing surgical techniques for such injuries are crude and ineffective and result in poor hand function. The scientific advance here was that we're able to create and extract new neural signals via nerve transfers amplified by muscle transplantation. These signals were then decoded and translated into solid mechanical trionic hand function. Before amputation, all 3 patients spent an average of 9 months undergoing cognitive training. Firstly, to activate these muscles, and then to use the electronic signal to control a virtual hand. Once they had mastered the virtual environment, they practiced using a hybrid hand, a prosthetic hand attached to a splint-like device fixed to their non-functioning hand. 3 months after amputation, robotic prosthesis gave all 3 recipients substantially better functional movement in their hands, improved quality of life, and less pain. For the first time since their accidents, all 3 men were able to accomplish various everyday tasks, such as picking up a ball, pouring water over a jug, using a key, cutting food with a knife, and using 2 hands to undo buttons. And that's tough. I mean, they were actually able to use this prosthetic hand to unbutton buttons. BRACHIAL, brachial injuries, occur when the nerves of this particular part of the nerve, the network of nerves that originate in the neck region and branch off to form nerves that control movement and sensation in the upper limbs, including shoulder, arm, forearm, and hand, are damaged. These injuries often occur as a result of trauma with high-speed collisions. And so far, this is this Professor Aziman. So far, bionic reconstruction has only been done in our center in Vienna. However, there are no technical or surgical limitations that would prevent this procedure from being done in centers with similar expertise and resources. And I'm going to go to, once again, to the screen share. There we go. Screen share. What happened?
It popped up. Watch.
Oh, man.
Yep, I see people.
Come on. What the heck is going on?
You could just post a link. Listen.
Technical difficulties, ladies and germs. All right. I'm back. I tell you I'm back.
You're back.
Let's try screen share again. Okay.
On the last page.
This is gonna work. I know it. It's not what I want. Let's try this again. Hopefully, is it working?
Yeah.
No, I got to hit the present to everyone button. Come on.
Looks good here. I can see YouTube.
Okay. Well, I don't know. You can see it. That's good enough. I can't see the whole thing.
Yeah, I can see the top.
Ow.
That's all we need, right?
Okay, guys. I'm going to try to... this is going to work. I'm going to make it work. Can't fool with the old guy.
Okay.
Now I'm going to enlarge it. And, okay, that looks better to me. Can you see it?
Yeah.
I can see it good enough.
Now that's him with just his hand, obviously. Phase 2, he's got the prosthetic hand attached to his own. But now look at this. I mean, this is freaking amazing.
That is pretty cool.
I mean, look at the dexterity he has with this particular new prosthetic hand. I have trouble picking up coins.
I tell you, simple things like that mean everything.
Yes. And if anything happens where you do lose function of a hand, like you say, just buttoning up your shirt. Okay, that's enough of the screen share. That's pretty freaking amazing. Can you imagine how much the quality of life has improved for that guy? For these 3 Austrians?
A lot. They can open up their own doors with their right hand and right with the left.
What did they say about cost? Did they mention anything?
No, they didn't. Now, no. Okay, let's see if I can get to the site myself. It's in the Lancet. It's the original story. Oh, shut up. I don't care about the artificial. Come on. Oh, you stupid. Oh, that didn't work. We're having fun tonight in the Hangout, that's for sure.
That's all right.
Okay. Whatever. I can't get the information. I don't know the cost. Certainly, I think of the soldiers, where you get DARPA involved in the United States. They're certainly prepared to spend a lot of money to help soldiers get these kinds of prosthetic devices. So if this technology really does work as well as what it looks like it's working, I'm sure DARPA, with their buckets of money, will get involved.
Plastic's cheap, I think, to make, so I don't think prosthetics, if we can just use the same process to make some of these materials that stretch and bend and all that.
I mean, the thing is, these guys had to go through almost a year of training. 9 months where they had to work with the existing muscles in their arm that they have, and then maybe another 3 months or so when they actually had to amputate parts of their hand and get it reattached with this new prosthetic device. So it's a long, drawn-out process, so it has to be expensive. But once it gets perfected, I mean, if this university in Vienna, I mean, if they can perfect it, it's definitely going to spread. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next story, and this is come on. Let's try it again, ladies and gentlemen. Why should anything work the first time I try it? And it's not working. This story, okay, Dale, you're going to have to take over this story because I can't open it.
So this is the one with the bionic eye.
Yeah, but number 2, story number 2.
Okay, so this is from the Mayo Clinic, from their news site. And the bionic eye implant offers hope of restoring vision. So it's a medical story, a science and technology advancement, and a romance wrapped into one moment when a man who is blind sees his wife again for the first time in a decade. Alan Durad began to have serious vision problems about 20 years ago due to retinitis pigmentosa, a degenerative eye disease affecting the retina. There's no effective treatment or cure. It ended his professional career, and after a decade, he was effectively blind, unable to see anything other than very bright light. He adjusted, even continuing woodworking by developing his sense of touch and spatial relationships, but he was unable to see his family, including 10 grandchildren or his wife, Carmen. Enter Raymond Leslie Jr., MD, Mayo Clinic researcher and ophthalmologist, who has been seeing Durad's grandson, who has early stages of the same condition. So they basically have a video here. I'm not sure if I can put it up.
I'll try to screen. Well, maybe you should. It'll show up on your screen if you can.
Okay, let's see here. We'll give this a shot.
This is an experiment, guys. Everybody watching. We're experimenting here.
Okay, let's see. We see you right on
That didn't work.
No, hold on.
there. I see myself. Oh, we see it.
Okay. That's not the video I want.
No?
No. Could you de-screen share that? Oh, there we go. Well, you see how excited the guy is. The video I wanted would show you what the vision looks like to him.
Oh, okay.
Now, the first thing, you see how excited the guy is, because he can even see shapes. You can see what an emotional experience it is. Can you imagine?
That's awesome.
And there is a link. Okay.
If he wasn't able to find her before, now he can.
This again, this is a first generation device. There. Okay. There you go. So you can see he can't really make out detail. Well, a little bit.
Yeah, it's better than nothing.
Man, that's a great story.
Looks like he's pretty emotional.
Oh, can you imagine the first? I mean, there's somebody who hasn't been able to see anything, and maybe 20 years or so. I forget how long. And then suddenly he has some vision, and this is, you know, first or second generation product. So I'm going to guess it'll get perfected.
Yeah, I can see him perfectly.
I mean, that's amazing. These first two stories show you how much technology is helping people get their life back. Get a real life.
Unfortunately, science is under attack right now by so many people around the world. Science is under severe attack. People have they don't believe in it. They're having trouble with it, and so yeah, people have to get with it and be open to people that spend a lot of time studying this stuff. And you've got to, again, it's good to be skeptical about something. But at a certain point, when you have a bunch of scientists saying something, you have to start to think, okay, these are educated people that have spent their whole lives on probably a singular purpose and understand it very well. So you got to go with it, people.
Well, I tell you what's happening is, I mean, you have people for political and other reasons. They refuse to accept what the scientists tell them about things like climate change. But now you've got somebody comes along, scientists come along, and they create a prosthetic hand for the soldier. They create a device where blind people, some blind people, can see. There you are. Bam. How can you argue with that? And as more and more people and young people, they see that, you know, they're going to accept the science. I don't know how they could not do it.
Oh, they can not do it. That's for sure. Some of the denial is a very strong emotion. And a lot of people love being in denial about things because they need to believe in something else. But belief.
Ignorance is bliss.
I guess ignorance is bliss in many cases, yeah.
For them.
In the case of some things, like climate change, the central issue isn't climate change itself. That, I mean, it's not a question about that. It's that you have some politicians who don't want the government to tell them what to do, and they're worried about job creation. The job creation, the fact that if we change how we live, we stop, you know, we stop the coal plants, etc. That there's the fear of people who work on these coal plants, etc., that they're going to lose jobs. But green technology creates an enormous number of jobs. It's inevitable. People who are denying what science is telling us, they're going to lose. I've even got a story. One of the things I want to talk about is you have the Muslim religion. And that's a religion where you have an enormous pushback by many of the leaders against science and technology. But they're losing even there because there's a site I found. It's called Muslim Science Site, where you have Muslims, practicing Muslims or PhDs, and they're starting programs. They're having conferences in Malaysia, and they're starting to reach out. And you know, this is a site on the internet, and the young Muslims in the United States, I mean, they're going to accept science as they use technology. Now, it's going to take a while. It's going to take a long time in many parts of the world, but it is inevitable, in my humble opinion.
I'm just looking at the site right now.
Okay, we can get into that. Let's see. Come on. My connection's a little bit slow.
Yeah, there's been tons of problems with the internet. Wasn't that net neutrality rule came down?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, we can blame that.
Maybe that's it. First of all, you've got this one story about.
Can you repeat?
There we go. These are Muslim women promoting science. You've got one woman, a Miriam Mizakarianaya, and I apologize, I'm butchering the names here. She's a professor of mathematics at Stanford University, the 2014 Fields Medal winner, International Congress of Mathematics. Let's see. I don't know if there's well. She once at Harvard for her graduate work. She was mentored by this other scientist. She was born and raised in Tehran, Iran. She was interested in writing and reading novels, fascinated by mathematics. She won the gold medal in the International Mathematic Olympics when she was 17. And eventually, she was educated in mathematics in Sharif University in Tehran, Iran. So in Iran, you can study the science. I don't know if she's still, well, she was at Stanford University, so I'm not really sure. She must be living in California right now, where Stanford University is. But she was educated. She received her mathematical education in a university in a Muslim country in Iran. You've got another woman. This is Dr. Amina, A-M-E-E-N-H-A, Garib Fakam, or something like that. The University of Emeritus, M-A-U-R-I-T-I-U-S. She was also a presidential candidate. She earned, let's see, she has a doctorate. She's earned distinction by studying plant life in one of the world's most important biodiversity spots. She was interested in science in high school. She went to the United Kingdom, where she did her university undergraduate work at the University of Surrey and got a doctorate in chemistry. You've got another woman, Annette Zayed, a Pakistani pediatrician. She won the $1 million Kaplo's Children Prize, and she works with Doctors Without Borders. Another Muslim female scientist, Paradis Sabati, or something like that, headed a team of researchers that used advanced genetic sequencing technique to identify a single point of infection from an animal reserve to a human in the current Ebola outbreak in West Africa. So,
cool.
I mean,
lots of women.
Yeah, and they had an international conference in Malaysia. So, I mean, these are young people, young women. All they need is access to education. In every country, in every Muslim country, the problem is mostly gaining an access to education and having the opportunity to get that education. And I'm going to read an article that was in Nature.com. And this is written by one of the people who's on that site, MuslimScience.com. No, that didn't work. Come on. Well, I'm going to read the story. It's from Muslim Science. No, that's not the story I want. Here we go. Here's the article. And this is Nature.com, and this is by, I cannot pronounce her first name. It's Rochmyaningsh. And it's a good backdrop. It says, recent terrorist attacks in Europe and continued activity by the jihadist group ISIS in the Middle East have thrown the spotlight firmly back on radical Muslims. Some studies blame the Muslim world's poor and unstable economies for the spread of this fundamentalism. Presumably then, improving the economy can help Muslim societies to tackle these radical movements. Science can play a big part in this economic development as it has in other places, but because some Muslims see a conflict between science and their faith, the philosophical question of how to reconcile the two is at the heart of many efforts to advance scientific development in the Muslim world, as it is in the United States as well, where we have places like Kansas, where the governor of Kansas doesn't want to support public schools because he believes they teach against the Christian religion. Going on with the story. Earlier this month, this organization, MuslimScience.com, gathered a task force of prominent Muslim scholars in Istanbul, Turkey, to discuss the importance of reconciliation for the future of the Islamic project and its ability to embrace modernity. The marriage of faith and science produced advances in mathematics, medicine, physics, and astronomy during the Middle Ages. To recreate the enlightened attitude present during this golden age, scholars argue Muslim scientists need to build broader societal support for science. And guess what? That's also a problem in the good old US of A. Scientists having a problem building broader support for society, in society for science. Now, in her view, this focus on personal reconciliation is a naive way to address the problem and one that is unlikely to have much effect. Reconciliation is philosophically and theologically important for individual scientists, but will have little impact on wider society. It demands critical thinking, and ultimately, the scientists it concerns form only a tiny part, less than 1%, of the world's Muslims. Attempts at reconciliation can even make the situation worse and harden anti-science attitude in Muslims. And even in the United States, we experience it when you have people like the Skeptic's Guide, perhaps, when they attend maybe a conference with people who are opposed to science. And that reconciliation, it just doesn't work because the people on the other side won't give an inch. Reading on. This has happened in Indonesia, home of the world's largest population, with the publication of the book Adam was Born, which attempts to reconcile Islamic faith and evolution by reanalyzing verses of the Quran as positive to science. The author, August Mustafa, enraged traditional clerics and polarized opinions. The problem is that, unlike Catholicism, Islam has no unifying voice of authority to rule on Quranic interpretation. Although it is legal for Mustafa to interpret the Quran, clerics have much more influence, and this gives them greater power. Rather than reconciliation, it is important to monitor and understand the ways in which political and ideological groups influence how young Muslims view science. Radical Islamicists, or of ISIS, see science as an attribute of their enemy, and they are exactly correct. They have denounced the great medieval Muslim scientists, and there's a couple here mentioned as heretics and atheists, and it's clear that such rhetoric will hold back scientific development in Muslim countries. Kind of a long article. Here in Indonesia, let's see. The influence is not all negative. The Muslim Brotherhood, though hostile to evolution, encouraged talented scientists to develop their careers and help place them in postgraduate courses overseas, typically in Japan. Kind of interesting. I don't know where these symptoms in Japan. Many of these people returned to Indonesia as university lecturers. However, some Muslim groups think that asking a lot of questions, this is weird, is a Jewish trait and one not to be encouraged. The convener of the task force says that Nazis labeled quantum mechanics as Jewish science. So fundamentalist groups have come along with the same idea. They call it the science of unbelievers. I'm going to stop there. It's kind of a long article. And I'm going to put a link to that article in our Hangout on YouTube. But Dale, what do you think so far?
Honestly, I'm glad that they're trying to put science in the forefront, but I think the two are incompatible. I think that people that are practicing religion, it's fine, and trying to do science, they're incompatible things. Science is about the purest form of logic that we can muster. It's about very carefully analyzing something, observing something in nature, and trying to make a determination with the best rational logic that we can bring to bear on it, and then peer review it and argue it. I think that's absolutely at odds with what religion is. Religion is the belief in something without evidence, and they call that faith, and that's fine for people that are doing it. And again, I think it's great that they're trying to learn science, but I find those two things very incompatible in my own way of thinking.
Well, you've got several PhDs who don't find it incompatible. And I don't know my history, but I know that when you go back to the period when Spain was governed by Muslims, and the leader, the Muslim leader who was in charge of Spain at that time was, I don't know what you want to call him, open-minded. But for instance, he had Jews as advisors. I don't know exactly how much he developed science, but he certainly used technology. And I'm going to guess there were educational facilities that encouraged scientific type thinking. But then you had the rise of Muhammad. You had there was a military force, and they took control of the Muslim world, and they replaced this particular more liberal thinking Muslim with one of their own who was more conservative, and he expelled the Jews, and and he adopted a much, he didn't want to, science was the devil, so to speak, and I'm exaggerating. So I think where you have this traditional Muslim, and maybe it's more the more enlightened Arabs taken over by a Muslim who wants to control their thinking. And it's control, I think, power, control and power. You can force people to use this holy book as their document for living. And that's control. And you also see that in some places in the Christian world, using that holy book, the Bible, as the guide to living. That's control. But what happens, and it has happened in some places in the Muslim world, just as it has happened in the Christian world, where you get, and I'm going to say younger people exposed to technology. If you're going to use technology, that's science, and Kyle is one of them. You got to understand the science. You got to get into the scientific world as you begin to use technology. And once you do that, you know, you can't go back to saying, well, you got to go back to the Bible, and the Bible says evolution is... No, they're not going to buy it. You know, they're using technology. They're using science. And so anyone who tries to impose that traditional kind of thinking, you have to go by a literal interpretation of the Bible, they're going to lose out. It's inevitable. They will lose out. And you're correct. You're 100% correct, Dale, that people who use that holy book, be it the Quran, be it the Bible, and say you've got to use this holy book as your way, you know, to live, those are the people who are afraid of science and afraid of technology. And you're exactly right. They're going to try to impose that particular holy book on their population. It's happening to a large extent in the Muslim world. Again, it's because you have clerics, and the clerics want to control the population. They want to control the population by saying, you got to live by the Quran. You got to live by this strict holy book of ours. But even there, they're gradually losing control. I think it's happening slowly in the Muslim world. It's happening a little quicker, much quicker, in the Christian world.
I guess the way I process it is I'm interested in the neurology of the human race, and I'm interested in why the human beings, there's a large proportion of human beings that are geared to believe in and have faith in God, and I find that really interesting. These are very, very intelligent people. And you know, and yet there's a large proportion that have a belief in something that does not have a rational basis, in my opinion. And again, whether it's Christians, Arabs that believe in you know, the Muslim faith. From my point of view, I'm interested in neurologically how that works in their mind and how they process that. And I think human beings like to find patterns in things. I think we're a people that want to find patterns, and if we can't find a pattern in something, we tend to fill in the spaces ourselves with either our mind's eye or try to complete something in the absence of information, because we don't like question marks. So I'm interested in the neurology of it. These are all, for the most part, the planet has, you know, the vast majority of the people on this planet are good people, but I'm interested in the neurological portion of why people tend to believe that way.
That's a good point, and yes, Kyle.
Oh, I thought that when I understand where Dale's coming from, because we try to analyze everything and we try to come up with a logical explanation for everything, but we haven't been able to come up with a logical explanation for a lot of our religions, other than that's what we saw.
Justin has joined us, I'm sorry, right at the right time. Justin, hey, we're starting to discuss science and religion.
Yeah, so I was saying I'm interested in, you know, so we're talking about a Muslim science site, that it's very educated Muslims that are practicing science, and there's a high proportion of women that you mentioned that are PhDs. But again, my whole view is I'm interested in the neurology behind that. I don't have any sort of faith in any sort of God. I'm a rationalist that believes in only things that have some sort of something that can be tested and prove out a prediction within nature. Not anything that I have to have a belief in the absence of evidence. So I'm very a staunch advocate in rationality. So you know, what does that mean? That means that we have a lot of good people out there that are, again, the high proportion are very, very wonderful people that mean well, but I think it comes down to the pattern recognition and our brains wanting to fill in holes that we can't fill in, we don't understand, and we want to fill in those question marks, and we fill them in with mythology quite often.
Justin, science and religion, is that incompatible? Can we hear you, first of all?
Marco.
Polo? No, that didn't seem...
We got you. Go ahead.
You got me?
Yes. Science and religion, is that incompatible?
Yes, of course. Absolutely. By their very definition, they're mortal opponents of each other. And I don't mean this. Even from the atheistic standpoint. I mean this from the religious believer's standpoint. I mean it from their perspective. I mean that they cannot accept science in any way, shape, or form and stay compatible with the ideals of their mythology. Look, the disclaimer of This Week in Science yesterday was a little bit of an eye-opener for me. Everybody knew the Giordano Bruno story and how that might have affected Galileo's decision to recant. All right, because Giordano Bruno, he's brought before this panel of 4 cardinals. They sentenced him to prison for not recanting that the sun is the center of the universe, or the solar system, and as we now know. And after 7 years of being in prison and not recanting, they sentenced him to a horrible burning alive, upside down naked, with a spike through his tongue in the town square. They were going to put Galileo in prison and begin the same process. He was called before the same cardinal who had sentenced Giordano Bruno. Galileo was the Pope at that time, was one of the 4 panel members who sentenced Giordano Bruno. He had become Pope. The thing I didn't know about it is that in 1930, they made the cardinal who was who had Galileo brought before him, who had previously ordered Giordano put to death, they made him a saint. They made this freaking homicidal, you know, anti-science, science censor a saint in 1930. You know, we're talking 300 years go by, and they still refuse. They canonized him and made him a saint. Now, granted, it was by the same Pope who was colluding with the Nazis, but this tells us the depth of the necessity to maintain their worldview against all opposition, against all facts, against all reality. You know, science doesn't really go out of its way to oppose religion. It goes after truth. It goes after fact. It goes after what's actually going on that we can prove and we have evidence for. And religion refutes proof in order to maintain mythology. Now, granted, when these things are formed, there isn't really a lot of proof accessible to people. They're makety-upping things that make sense without knowing any of the facts. Great. But then, once the facts become available, the facts become the enemies of the religion. They start to tear away at the foundations of these belief systems. So it's really not that science even cares that religion exists. Science cares that religion exists the same way science cares that science fiction exists, or that fairy tales exist, or that, you know, kids can watch cartoons with bunnies and a coyote that can defy gravity for some period. Science doesn't care, really. about that. That's not what science is concerned with. But if you're trying to say, no, it really happens when you run off the ledge and you don't know about gravity yet, you don't fall. It's not till the roadrunner hands you the book on gravity and you study it for a few seconds that you realize gravity exists that you actually fall. I mean, it's like trying to maintain that belief system, like that would actually happen. And it's extremely dangerous to religion because they've staked out ground that requires them to maintain it no matter what.
Yeah, well, first of all, some people of religious faith are able to reconcile their beliefs with science. Obviously, by, I don't know if you had a chance to look at that site, MuslimScience.com, where you have PhDs. And the interesting thing was, a couple of women who are PhDs got their education in Iran. Now, the first thing you would think of is, okay, Iran? I got to teach about science in Iran. But
oh, absolutely. You can't do it in Saudi Arabia, but you can do it in Iran.
Yeah, well, to me, the issue between religion and science, really more on the political level, we're talking about control. You're talking about using a holy book, whatever it is, and telling people, this is the book you gotta go by.
Yeah.
And people, you know, and then you impose your control on these people. Even in the Quran, where it tells you how you're supposed to wash yourself. That's control. As more people, and it's younger people, gain access to information beyond that little holy book. And I'm seeing it right now in the Middle East, and a point of mine I wanted to talk about is that little smartphone, that little portable computer. You know, that cleric is in trouble. Not maybe right now, but he's going to be in trouble in a little while, because you got people, they got that little cheap smartphone, that access to the web, that access to all of the information in the world. Mm-hmm. And that's education. And the clerics can't control it. And I think they're terrified of it. And they're going to threaten to cut people's heads off, just like the old popes did. But that's power. That's not necessarily religion incompatible with science. That's science being incompatible with some religious leaders who are trying to control or impose their power on the population.
But that's
nothing is incompatible in religion to science as long as you never ask the question within religion, is that actually true? As long as you leave that out of it, as long as you're not actually attempting to prove scientifically anything in your religious view, then yeah, it's all a political or an ideology. You have an ideology at that point, which is ideologies aren't incompatible with science.
Yeah, so if you take one of these Muslim PhDs that have spent an enormous time studying, and have them take something from their science background to study their religion, what would the outcome be if you had them do a probability distribution on the top 10 miracles that occurred within their holy books, and did a probability distribution based on like a rational output? What's going to happen is two things. They're either going to completely convince themselves and fill in the holes with things that can't be substantiated and call it faith, but then we get into something that's purely not science. Or if they're honest with themselves, they're going to find out that it's not rational and it can't be done based on physics, on what many of these so-called miracles that have occurred. So again, if they use their science within their religion, there's a complete incompatibility, is my belief.
Let me just read what Kyle, our young friend from Minnesota, not getting a chance to say anything edgewise between us, but religion is stuck with old and rejects new, but accepts it slowly The new Pope, for example, making a difference by sharing new views. To realize that aliens may exist is something after denying it for many years.
You know what? In the future, yeah, they have to keep rewriting themselves and reinventing themselves, but it's because science has convinced the masses that certain things just aren't the way they are, and science and education has made it obvious. So, you know, within religion, they have to keep rewriting the books and keep reinterpreting it, so that they don't lose, you know, the people invested in their religion.
Yeah, and I guess it's the thing I just don't get about it is, you know, this is illiterate literature, right? This isn't even, there's not even good morality stories in these texts. It's
oh my
not
God, the Old Testament. Huh.
Right? Mother Goose, I would rather have teach my children, right? With the themes and the parables that teach little life lessons. There is nothing positive in the Old Testament. It's just awful, and it must have been a miserable, horrible people of illiterate sheep farmers who came up with this as a way to keep each other in line. I mean, they needed that much doom and gloom to try to keep one another from killing each other of the same kind. I don't know.
Yeah, that is exactly right, because I can remember my grandfather had a small church up in Maine, and that was, I don't know, he was Baptist, and that was fire and brimstone, man. You're gonna burn in hell, all you sinners out there, unless you read the good book.
But what we really need is robot hell. That's the one that's gonna. Yeah. So we're still living with the ideas of illiterate sheep herders, but it's not even the illiterate sheep herders. The illiterate sheep herders came up with the word of mouth versions of all of this, and then at some point later, completely removed from that time and space, somebody else wrote it down, and somebody else wrote it down for a political agenda that they wanted to utilize. Because at one point, the written word was so hard to have, like to hear two people consistently tell the same story. Never happened because everybody had it, you know, it was all storyteller word of mouth. Now you got a written down version, it becomes truth. How do you know? Because two people read it exactly the same way. It must be true. The whole thing is ridiculous. This whole religion thing is absolutely astounding to me that this still exists in this day and age. And despite everything that we have learned about how untrue their views of the universe were, how the age of miracles apparently is over. That's why there isn't this stuff happening now today. And everybody fills in their own personal version of what they expect, you know, what they believe their religion is about, regardless of what's written down, regardless of the facts. Except somebody like ISIS, maybe. ISIS, I really do appreciate for having a literal interpretation of a text and just taking it all the way. We're just going to read it just by what it says and go all the way with it. I love that about it. You know? Great. That's at least they're honest. You know, at least they're following the text as written and not trying to interpret some sort of modern feel-good version of it where they can ignore this, that, and the other and then, you know, still call it their religion that they believe is the Word of God. No, they're going to follow it like it's the Word of God, like this has been commanded upon you, and thou shalt kill the infidels.
You know, on one point, I agree with the both of you. I don't agree that it's necessarily irreconcilable, but I agree with science, you're talking about probability. With religion, you're talking about certainty. In science, you would say, okay, you know what? Maybe there is something outside our universe. It's possible. Maybe there's some God, who the heck knows, outside our universe. But the probability of that is like 0.0009001. Whereas in religion gives people certainty. No matter how bad you are, whatever situation you're in, there's one thing you can count on. You can count on there's a God. And if you follow this particular doctrine with 100% certainty, you will be reborn in heaven. You will have, it'll be a perfect world for you. So you have, I understand why religion is such a powerful thing, because that certainty, it gives people something they can hang their hat on, certainty. Science? Anything is possible in science. I mean, quantum mechanics, come on.
One thing you said earlier was, I think, Ed, you mentioned the power of the internet and it changing things, and the clerics can no longer control. But I think we mentioned this last time. That's a double-edged sword, don't forget, where they're actually getting quite good at promoting their mythology and using it as recruiting tools and everything else. So it's a double-edged sword that that can be quite concerning. So, but I'm very interested in the neurology of it again, because I think the general masses are very, very good people, and I don't understand how reasonably intelligent people can believe in something in the absence of evidence. So I find that very, very interesting. What is it about us that does that? Because I have to be honest with myself as well. There's lots of times I've convinced myself and I fall in love with my ideas, and I want to believe a certain thing, and even when someone proves me wrong, I still want to fight for my own position. And Ed, we've talked about this. It's very human to want to fight for your position, even though you're basing it on a position of weakness, you know, with respect to probability based on evidence. So I think it's built in all of us. It's just that you know, a smaller percentage of us, I think, in the world are able to say, I don't know, and that's okay to not know something.
Oh, I would say it's something else. Actually, I don't believe it's a not knowing. I believe it is a knowing. I believe it's an awareness of self. And here's why. There's kind of two sources that I see that built-in belief ability coming from. One is having parents. One is being born a hairless ape that can't walk, feed itself, communicate, can't do anything for a prolonged period of time as this massive project to construct a brain is underway. And in that period of time, we're constantly, the entire time, in complete reliance on others for nutrition, for our safety, for our well-being, for everything. We are born learning how to rely completely on a higher power, which is parent. But there's another thing that's integrated into the human mind from the human brain, the neurology of the human brain, from evolution, which is that animals are stupid. and animals from, and I mean, we can go back as far as primitive a life form as you like, animals don't rationalize whether or not they should hunt in order to eat. They get hunger pangs. They get hungry, and hunger is a lack of endorphin. It's you know, it's the brain punishing the rest of the body, telling it you must go and get food, otherwise I'm going to make you feel miserable right now. And so this brain, there's a part of the brain that's in control beyond our rationality. It's our instinct brain. It's our primal survival brain. It's the one that tells us to go out and reproduce. It's the part of the brain that tells us to go eat. We don't check our clock and go, you know, actually let me check my schedule on my iPhone here. Oh, it says I haven't eaten since breakfast. Oh, I'll better schedule that in, because that's probably a good idea. No, your stomach grumbles, you start to get hunger pangs, your concentration starts to narrow. Like, all of these things take place. So there's, within all of us, within all of our neurology, there's this higher power that's commanding us and directing us and telling us to do things. Now, we can hijack this. We can hijack this by having sex without reproduction. We hijack this by finding delight in things that weren't there for the brain to tell us to do. I mean, what is entertainment? How come entertainment is so fascinating? How come a video game can be fun to play? How come a movie is so amazing? These are things that our brain wasn't really wired for. But what we're doing is hijacking other things the brain was wired for. So it's a self-awareness that we don't have to just follow what the brain says to do in that sort of animal control brain that pulls those levers and tells us eat, sleep, reproduce. We can do other things. We can do a whole list of other things with our awareness brain. And I feel like religion is tapping into both the prolonged period of being an invalid infant and that animal control brain. And you kind of think of it too. Some of it taps directly in, like the whole Catholic, don't use birth control. Well, yeah, birth control isn't just against Catholicism; it's against the animal control brain that wants you to have sex to reproduce. This is why I've given you these. This is why your brain is trying to preserve its genes to get you to reproduce. And if you use a prophylactic, you've just short-circuited and hijacked the entire reason you have all these endorphins that make this thing so pleasurable. All the focus of making this happen so you would reproduce, now you're hijacking it. It's amazing to me that the Catholics follow that right through. They're just emulating the animal control brain in this instance. So I do think it's in all of us, but I don't think that the atheistic view is I'm okay not knowing. I think it's a self-awareness of, okay, I understand why I might be attracted to this idea or why others would be attracted to this idea. I could see the comfort of, I grew up with parents, now I'm out on my own. Now I still want a higher power because that was convenient and nostalgic and warm, and it was this great thing when my parents were alive and protecting me. But now I'm out here on my own. I want to reproduce that. I want another higher power. I want another parent, father figure, mother figure to look after me, to watch over me. I get the nostalgia for that, but I think the atheistic point of view, or the rationalist point of view, is understanding a bit about where those things come from and knowing that not only do you not necessarily need those in the world, but also seeing how manipulated you could be if you assessed that higher power to somebody else's agenda or ideology or completely earthly, materialistically based decision-making.
Dale, you wanted to know neurologically how religion works, and I would say it's a placebo effect. That's how it works.
Well, you know what, we do know a lot about how it works, and like to break down what Justin was saying a little bit more, he was talking about the instinctual patterns that we have that were built to react, to fight and flight is a core instinct. And if you look at where the centers of the brain where that's active, it's in the inner core of the brain. If you look at the center of the brain near the nerve stem where the amygdala is, that's where your fight and flight is. And of course that part of the brain is instantly responsive, and that's why it's more powerful, where religion can be a powerful thing, because it's at a more instinctual level right near your core. The neocortex, which is sort of the outside of the brain, the outside parts where that rationality is, that's much slower as a result of being further away from the core of the brain. So a result of that is what kicks in first is if you're crossing the street and a car is about to hit you, you're not going to be rational about that. You'll rationalize it later, but your instinctual systems will kick in first because it's physically near the center, the core of your brain where that amygdala is.
We're talking about, well, the human brain. That is the thing that has allowed us to survive, the evolution of the human brain and tool use. Without tools, we're dead. We're gone. That's it. We would not be able to survive, would not have been able to survive without a brain that could figure out how to use tools. Initially, as society develops, you're talking about just lots of stuff we don't know what's happening. What's that shiny thing up in the sky? That's the great god Google Mooga or something. I don't know. So, but as society evolves, really, as our tool use evolves, so does technology. That's where science comes from. Science comes from tool use, understanding how to use and create tools. That's where science comes from. And without that, we wouldn't have survived, and it's quite possible we won't survive in the future. But you know, you still got, as you said, that other part of the brain that, you know, is looking for an answer when there is none, and religion perhaps fills that void.
Right. I don't understand, so God did it.
Yeah.
Which makes perfect sense when you don't have an understanding of anything. It's when you get the understanding of things and you're still sticking with that. That I don't understand.
That may be peer pressure. If you have a family around you that's very devoted Catholics or Muslims or whatever religion you want, there's immense peer pressure to be able, you know, to stay within that family unit, and I think people are marginalized if they try to go against it, regardless of their intellect.
If you look at the tools of science, if you look at controlling information, that's what I really mean. And originally, you had information controlled by a small group of people, and everyone else relied on them to tell them what was happening in the world. And then I think you have the book being invented. Now all of a sudden you've got everything in hard copy, and now that's harder to control. You have these books in libraries, people can read it. As Justin talked about, somebody writes down an event and there it is, there's the hard copy. You can't create any mythology about it, it's right there in black and white. And I think the next big revolution might have been the internet, where all this information is out there for anybody to see. We can access information, we can talk to anybody we want. And that's why I feel that that little smartphone, that cheap portable computer, is going to really facilitate this revolution in freeing up information. Even when you see pictures from Egypt and from other places where you have, you know, very conservative people, what do they got? They got that little cell phone. They got that little cell phone. They're communicating through that device. And eventually, and that's what young people use. They use it as this portable computer, and that can't be controlled. And governments are going to try to control it. They can't control it. China is going to try to control it. They can't control it. And so I think that that little portable computer device, giving everyone access to the internet, I think that's really going to eventually be the reason why science will win out.
So here's a good question. We have the religious mind and trying to understand it. What about if you take an anti-vaxxer or some sort of truther, conspiracy theorist, where there's the absence of evidence? Is it the same neurological process? You know, is it the same factors causing this irrational behavior?
I would guess yes. But that's why you see they've lost out in the United States. The
I would probably say
have
no.
been overwhelmed. Go ahead.
I would probably disagree. I'd probably say that these that it actually might be kind of interesting though. Put that way. I would see most of your conspiracy theorist types ultimately falling into a category of having a paranoid personality disorder, or not personality disorder, but being paranoid to maybe to the point of even further DMSO qualifications, because you're looking for ways to, you already have the sense, you already have the feeling of there being this other, this oppressor that's constantly there. Now you're just going out and getting details together with others to build a scenario where this is actually in the real world.
Okay. So, for example, take chemtrails.
Oh, chemtrails, yeah. So planes had vapor trails when I was a child. Although, supposedly, this only started under Clinton with this vapor trail thing. This is insanity. But, hey, great. You have plenty of paranoid, delusional people who want to get together and talk about something they don't know about and create a whole story about it. I see the same thing really a lot with the alien UFO stuff. You have people who are believing in the same scenarios, same stories, but without investigation. One of my favorites was, I was just talking to somebody about this too, the Japanese airliner over Alaska that saw these floating objects. And this is considered, this was a pilot with years of experience of flying, and he reported seeing these things, and the U.S. Air Force saw something trailing him. Well, they didn't see the three objects he was describing. What they saw was later they defined as a, a Doppler echo. So they saw the plane, and they saw the same plane following itself. They didn't see three objects. They saw, and they eventually clarified that they didn't see anything else up there. And this is used as like, hey, this was an airline pilot who saw it and had, this confirmation, whatever. What they don't tell you is when you go and investigate that this guy this wasn't his first UFO sighting. He had several of these before and after, and they all became more elaborate, and none of his crew on their interviews collaborated his story. But it still gets used, and people believe these things are proofs, and it can't be refuted because it's all government conspiracy to cover it up and keep it quiet, because gosh knows scientists would never want to talk about encountering life from another planet because it would be too hard for the people of the planet to understand.
See,
I don't know why. I don't really understand the rationality behind why they think all of these things would be covered up and hidden. But I don't know. I get the ability for the human mind to believe in fallacy. It isn't really that astonishing. I mean, that's all we've had to believe in for all of civilization. We've had very little reality that beyond our, meat space of hunting and gathering and farming, beyond things we could actually touch and feel and sense. We haven't had a reality beyond that wasn't makey up.
So maybe there's
very recently.
But maybe, so what you're saying maybe is because of belief has been with us for so long that there's a genetic advantage in belief of grouping people together, even though it is mythology, that's how we've kind of evolved through this belief system. Is that possible?
No, more I would say, yeah, well, maybe. But more I would say is that we've been talking in mythology for so long. We've been imagining characters in the stars. We've been imagining that the east wind, the north wind, the south wind, the west wind were all controlled by different gods, and that it was their will, everything had a will behind it. And sort of in imagining this over 100,000 years or so, I can see why this is pretty well ingrained to find an answer and just believe in it, and not be that inquisitive, not be that questioning, not be that rational. I mean, really, rationality largely started with the Greeks and then nearly died out and kept fighting its way back. And it's a strain in humanity. It's like this undercurrent in humanity to be rational that's been gaining more and more strength over time because it works. But I don't think it's necessarily inherent in us to be rational. I don't think that's necessarily something that we came equipped with. I think this is a learned behavior. Even language, though. Language isn't abstract. Believing in things that people say, having those images pop in your head is believing in something abstract that isn't a real thing. It's a word. It's a connotation. This is all. We're all, you know, our thoughts in our brain. We're all little 3-pound tissue sacks in a hard outer shell. We're all these little brains in here. We're using our senses to access the outside world. And we've trained our brains over the millennia to believe in things that aren't real. Brain doesn't know. It's stuck inside. Well, it doesn't even care. As long as I'm in this shell, we don't even care what's real and what isn't real. As long as I get fed.
Can I use that on my next date? I think that's really romantic to call my date a 3-pound. What'd you call it? A 3-pound sack, a brain sack?
3-pound tissue sack.
Tissue sack. That's romantic. I'm gonna use that one. That's awesome.
Now, you know, when you talk about myths work fine as long as there's an absence of information that people can see, so that they can stop believing in the myth. You take, we had the couple of articles we talked about, a guy who was blind, an older person who was blind, and they've outfitted him with this device so he can, you know, see a little bit. He can make out outlines. Instead, now, before 100 years ago, it was faith healing, right? Christian Science people, faith healing, faith healing. Okay, you go and view faith heal, and I'm going to go over here to this hospital, and I'm going to get this little device put on my head, and I can start seeing. And the Christian Science religion is losing followers. Well, one, they're dying off because they're not seeking medical attention, and people are seeing, wait a second, you know, maybe you want that placebo effect and you pray, and then you go have the operation. But you go have the operation.
See, I'm interested in the common denominator, and I think there is one, whether it's chemtrails or whatever conspiracy that you have, whatever myth that you believe in, and I think it comes down to pattern recognition, where your brain, to be satisfied, there's this historic urge that we have to fill it in with something, and if you don't have a certain level of intellect, you know, in some cases, some brains, it's about intellect, and they'll fill it in with information that, you know what, if 100 of my peers are telling me that God did it, that's what I'm going to believe, that's what my family says. Why would my family ever lie to me? My family loves me. So there's a very powerful way of expanding on that pattern of belief. And then in other circumstances, I think it's different. You have intellectuals that are still believing, but I think the common denominator still is peer pressure. And even though I might not necessarily believe it, my family is still there, putting the pressure on. But I think these things have neurological denominators that I don't completely understand. But I think they're there because I get very emotional about this sometimes, because I want people to think rationally. I want the planet to be a better place. And that emotion is not rational. When I act emotionally and I get upset about these issues, that's not a rational, that does nothing to solve anything. So I myself catch myself getting emotional, and that's not going to help anything. We have to have understanding in order to move forward.
Well, I agree largely with part of it. I think you could study people who have sports teams that they're fans of, because the part of it's the family, but it's also a loyalty thing. It's a patriotism thing. It's a go team. When you watch your team, sports ball team, play the other sports ball team, you don't want the better team to win. You might be the underdog. You still want to win. You got loyalty to your team regardless of who's the better team or who should win, right, on paper. Who's got the better athletes? That's not the contest you want to see. The contest you want to see is your team winning. And there's a loyalty there. There's a kind of like patriotism and nationalism. It's, you know, racism, like all of these things. I want people like me to get ahead. I want people like who want what I want, or who we're wearing the same colored jersey, whatever it is, waving the same flag to come out ahead. And so you look at a football game and you see you see a bad play and you go, why'd they flag that? No, that was totally fine. And then the other team does the same thing, and you're like, where's the flag? Where's the flag? Didn't you see that was blatant? Your perspective is totally mixed. I would say I don't believe, though, that there are any intellectuals who are religious. I don't believe this, and partly because I think you need to call yourself an intellectual, you have to have that sort of Socrates-esque willingness to disregard your own beliefs, to disregard the last statement you made. When somebody makes a better statement, you go, oh yeah, the thing I said just 5 minutes ago, yeah, you're right, total bullshit, don't believe it myself. You have to have that fluidity to go with the better idea, or the idea that's the most logical. The problem I see is there's intellectual-looking gymnastics that takes place when defending a preconceived notion of what the truth is going to be before the argument started. Regardless of, you can talk to priests, you can talk to the rabbi, you can talk to the imam. They're all going to have intellectual gymnastics. They're going to be clever. They're going to be able to give convincing reasons, to their own, of why this, that, or the other thing written in the text didn't match reality. I had this conversation once where this guy was explaining to me that there was somewhere in Psalms that stated that the seen is made up of the unseen. And he goes, see? This is the Bible describing the atom, describing quantum physics. The seen is made up of the unseen. It was written 10,000 years ago, whatever, right? I'm like, okay. So does that mean then that really, if there was a second coming, it would be like, because back then, I understand, they're talking to a bunch of literate sheep herders, the seen is made up of the unseen is about the best explanation they could handle. But would the second coming be more like a Leonard Susskind? Would it be going into the complex math of string theory? Would it be, is the second coming going to be not a book of parables or analogies, but an actual hardcore physics lecture? And how long will it take to complete this? I mean, how complicated, how in depth will it be? Because we now have brilliant minds capable of, figuring out the evaporation rate of black holes. Are they going to go to Stephen Hawking and say, okay, we're going to explain it to you, and then you try the best you can to explain it to everybody else? Is it going to? He's like, well, no, I don't think that's the core message. So then the seen is made up of the unseen is just a ridiculous throwaway thing, but they will grasp onto all sorts of things that they feel is intellectually sound, but the basis of it will always come down to some text that was used thousands of years ago to describe to people who hadn't invented or hadn't utilized algebra even to explain the world around them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then of course the thing is, the Greeks had postulated the atom long before the Bible was actually written too, but that was.
I paused for a second and you got me.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Justin.
And in the future there will be robots. That's all.
Robots. There you go. That was the kind of point that I was thinking of in terms of why mythology is not going to be able to control people's thinking increasingly, and that's because if you have jobs, people have to get a job. The kinds of jobs that are going to be available in the future, as more and more robots take over manual kinds of thinking, are going to require technical skills and an education got nothing to do with religion. You can pray for that job all the heck you want. You're going to have the skills. You're going to have to go to school. You're going to have to get that technical training, and you're going to learn that myths don't work. You have that little town in Texas with fracking. And you had the people every week for a year or more. They had a little prayer circle. Didn't do a bit of good until finally, you know, they realized, you know, wait a second, we're using all this water and we don't have, and we're exporting the water way over here. We don't have any water for our farms. I wonder if there's a connection. And they passed legislation. They want to outlaw fracking. So
I reshared a picture on my Facebook page about a week ago, and it was really good. It was a picture of the space shuttle, beautiful picture of the space shuttle going up, you know, just coming off the launch pad. And the caption was science, because you can't pray this shit into space. So I thought that was very, very witty, and also made a strong, funny point. It was really good.
Yes, the humans can pray all they want. It won't help.
I'm not going to read it, but here's another example of what I'm talking about, proof. There's this science, you had a dead fjord. You had this body of water in Sweden, I think it was. Let me...
Sweden has a decent amount of fjords. Not as many as Norway, still fewer than Finland, but the fjords are plentiful throughout that Nordic region.
Okay, you got this dead fjord. It is dead. It is gone. There ain't nothing living there. So the scientists come along with this technology, and they reoxygenate the water using pumps. Well, guess what? There's life coming back. There's the proof. Now, you could, if you could be a Swede over there, and you could do your rain dance, or you could whatever, pray to the gods, and a scientist comes along and says, well, we got these little tools we built, and we reoxygenated the water, and there it is. Now you guys can go fishing again. Proof.
Yeah, the Swedes, though, have many, many gods. They would take them a long time to pray to all of the gods.
Well, I don't know if I think science has to continue to provide technological advancement. It tends to provide to the masses as the different types of breakthroughs, as they get more refined and you mass produce them, it gets cheaper, and hopefully that is enough in the future of humanity, that as science continues to provide, that it's not just simply stepped on by mythology saying, no, human rationalism didn't create this, God did. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully people understand that it's our humanity and it's our willingness to be logical and unbiased that's creating these things. Because if not, if it goes the other way, and I worry about that, because that anti-vaccine movement is very close to my heart. It's simply just, it's nonsense and crazy and dangerous. So yeah, hopefully science can provide, and provide so much that there's a belief in it, and people can dispense with mythology.
Let me change the subject a little, because there was one science article I wanted you to go over, Dale, and I've just put it in the chat area. It's talking about how viral remnants controlling genome. Can you see it, Dale?
Yeah, I got it up. You want me to read through it?
Yeah, why don't you, well, let me know, have you read it before? Did you get a chance to read it before?
No, I didn't, but
okay.
Let's try to understand.
I'm interested to know what you think of it.
Okay, so it says scientists have uncovered how viral remnants helped shape control of our genes. So in their latest paper, conducted the first systematic study of the largest group of human transcription factors called C2H2ZF. Okay, so they're saying that viral remnants help shape our genes, and for sure, I have a belief in that. So the Toronto scientists uncovered how viral remnants help shape control of our genes. If genes were lights on a string of DNA, the genome would appear as an endless flicker as thousands of genes come on and off at any given time. Tim Hughes, a professor at the University of Toronto's Donnelly Centre, is set on figuring out the rules behind this tightly orchestrated light show, because when it fails, disease can occur. So genes are switched on and off by proteins called transcription factors. These proteins bind to precise sites on DNA that serve as guideposts, telling transcription factors that their target genes are nearby. In their latest paper published in Nature Biotechnology, Hughes and his team did the first systematic study of the largest group of human transcription factors called C2H2-ZF. Despite their important roles in development and disease, these proteins have been largely unexplored because they posed a formidable challenge for researchers. C2H2-ZF transcription factors count over 700 proteins. Around 3% of all human genes are within these 700 proteins. So to make matters more complicated, most human C2H2-ZF proteins are very different from those in other organisms, like those in mice. This means that scientists could not apply insights gained from animal studies to human C2H2-ZFs. Hughes' team found something remarkable. The reason C2H2-ZFs are so abundant and diverse, which makes them difficult to study, is that many of them evolved to defend our ancestral genome from damage caused by the notorious selfish DNA. Selfish DNA are bits of parasitic DNA whose only purpose is to multiply, a kind of virus for our genome. They seize a cell's resources to make copies of themselves, which they insert randomly across the genome, causing harmful mutations along the way. Almost half the genome is made of selfish DNA, which probably came from the ancient retroviruses, which, similar to the modern counterparts, inserted their DNA into the host genome. When this happens in an egg or sperm, the viral DNA gets passed on to the next generation, and the selfish DNA is then known as the endogenous retroelements, or EREs. So evolutionary biologists believe that selfish DNA was instrumental in making genomes bigger, giving natural selection additional DNA material to tinker with. But Hughes' data suggests that EREs took center stage in an evolutionary arms race, and that this change spawned C2H2-ZFs, a new group of proteins. It is an enthralling tale of conquer and enslave, one that stretches from before mammals existed to the present day. Hughes says that C2H2-ZFs initially evolved to switch off EREs. As new EREs invaded the genome of our lizard-like ancestor, new C2H2-ZFs arose to prevent them from disrupting gene function. This would explain how they came to be so abundant, but also why they're so diverse among different organisms. What I think was not appreciated until this study is that retroelements are really a driving force in the evolution of transcription factors themselves. So all mammals have a whole bunch of custom transcription factors that came about to silence the EREs. But the EREs and these new transcription factors are different, even for different vertebrates. So these EREs are now harmless because they are millions of years old. So over time they accumulated mutations which pepper the genome at a constant rate, and as a result lost their ability to multiply and move around. So the C2H2-ZFs, on the other hand, took on new jobs. These proteins began using the EREs scattered across the genome as docking sites from which they could take control of nearby genes. The conquered EREs were finally enslaved. So Hughes describes a neat example of this process. One C2H2-ZF family member, a transcription factor called ZNF189, evolved to silence an ancient retroelement known as line L2, which is a staggering 100 million years old. L2 is now inactive, but ZNF189 still binds to it because it uses L2 remnants to each other's genes. Relics of L2 sequences happen to be near genes that drive brain and heart development. And so ZNF189 could take on a new role in shaping these organs, an arrangement preserved by natural selection because it was beneficial to the embryo. So the ZFN189 likely puts brakes on the brain genes, similar to its ancient role of L2. But in heart cells, it may actually turn genes on because it misses the part that makes the off switch. This story is a beautiful example of how malleable genomes are in the hands of evolution. So that's a really interesting article, actually. I've learned something there. Now, I think there's a lot of truth, and they're really onto something. So they're saying that viral DNA, these bits and remnants that have been with us throughout, our evolution, inserted themselves into our genomes. Lots of them are inactive now, but as a result of mutation of these viral genomes, it's mutated this stuff, and as a result, a high proportion of these are transcription factors, which control our epigenetics. And so basically it's saying, viral DNA had a central role in how we interact with our physical environment, I think is the conclusion that they're drawing.
Yeah, I hear that term, the selfish DNA, all the time. And now I can put I can put a better label to it. It's a viral remnant. And viruses, they just want to reproduce. They want to take over, they want to reproduce. But then, as they mentioned, this other C2H2 whatever, is that the ERFs? No, that's not the ERFs.
ERO, I think it was.
I forget which one it is. Yeah, the C2H2 ZF transcription factors. So they put the brakes on the viral remnants, and would it be say they allowed the human genome, giving the human genome perhaps greater adaptability, the ability to evolve more freely, evolve better, as opposed to the selfish DNA that just wants to reproduce?
Well, the selfish DNA is, when my understanding of it is early on in our evolution, the selfish DNA was a mechanism that really had no function within our body other than a viral vector that came from an external source, and it became a part of our, it's inserted itself in our DNA, but didn't really have a function in early days. And
let me stop you there. When you say early days, how long ago are you talking about? A hominid, an actual human?
No, I think like reptilian.
That's pretty okay.
So I think and that's all creatures, right? There's selfish DNA in all these creatures, and basically it reproduced in your body by itself, and its function was to reproduce its own code. But later on, as they're saying here, that as the selfish DNA mutated over a long period of time, that's where we got a high proportion of our epigenetic traits. Because when you control a transcription factor, basically that's coming from the environment usually. So I think that's the conclusion that they're trying to draw, is that a lot of our epigenetic traits come from early viral vectors.
What about current epigenetic factors? Because the epigenome is continuing to affect evolution through RNA, through transcription factors.
Well, yeah, we really don't know. Like there's we have a lot of science that's spread out. The picture is still weak at the moment. We've sequenced a lot of these things and can see them, can't quite understand them all yet. But I think the important conclusion they've drawn from this is a high ratio of our epigenetic traits that we have because of these transcription factors came originally from external viral vectors. So early in our evolution, pre-hominid days, we had these viral vectors. They just served to reproduce in our body and serve no other function. But as they mutated, a large proportion affected us now to this day. That's a lot of our epigenetic traits are based on historical viral DNA.
Yeah, the interesting thing to me, or the thing I'm most curious about, is the effect epigenetics has on mutations. And I'm thinking in terms of inheritable traits, because to my way in thinking, okay, you have the epigenome, the environment outside the genome creates stress of some sort, so that when transcription takes place, there's a transcription error. You have transcription errors caused by the epigenome, stress from the epigenome in some way. So the epigenome is creating transcription errors, but the part that I'm still having a problem with is when I think of DNA, I'm thinking of inheritable traits. Traits we pass on to our offspring in our DNA. Now I'm looking over here and I'm seeing these epigenome stress causing transcription errors in the proteins that are produced in an adult cell, hemoglobin in a blood cell. That's what our RNA is doing. How does that factor in? How does that transcription error become inheritable in the DNA?
Okay, well let's talk about what it actually is, because a lot of times we have these big words and can't break them down, and this may not completely answer your question, but you got to remember, so DNA it's wound up really tightly together around proteins, where they actually wind themselves around these proteins called histones, and there's lots of them, and they're all, and then they make these basically these squiggly little creatures, right, that we call chromosomes, and they're all packed together very tightly. Now the ones that are exposed on the outside, they have fancy words for this, and they're called hydrophilic, which means the DNA that's exposed to the outside of that wormy-looking chromosome, that's code that can actually be executed. Then you have hydrophobic DNA, which is on the inside, and it's not accessible. That code is simply not accessible because it's on the inside of the chromosome, right? Mm-hmm. So epigenetics can affect that the ratio of certain parts of code that needs to be executed that have function, right? And if you have a small part of important piece of code that needs to be hydrophilic to execute, but it's actually contained within the chromosome, it can execute properly. And in fact, there may be not transcription errors, but errors just in the reading, because it's contained within the inside. So there's scientists studying this chromatin, and they're looking at chromatin remodeling, which is essentially the epigenetic influence of how this thing assembles itself. And because it really comes down to a type of structure. So I don't know if that may help a little bit. I don't think it's a good answer, but it paints a clear picture of what this really is, other than using big words. It comes down to simple concepts.
No, that was very helpful, because it leads me in another direction. These two words that you used, what were they? the path of something or other?
Hydrophilic and hydrophobic, you mean?
I gotta write this down. Excuse me. The old man's memory doesn't. Could you put it in the chat area by any chance?
Yeah, it was hydrophobic and hydrophilic, right?
Okay. That's two words I can now look up.
And again, just break it down. So hydro is water, and phobic is like a phobia, so it doesn't like water. So when you put hydro and phobic together, right, it doesn't want to be on the external part of the chromosome. It wants to be inside. It's hydrophobic. The reason it gets hydrophobic is the whole science of chromatin remodeling. So why does it become hydrophobic? And we have some very good reasons as to why this happens, but the picture isn't completely clear yet.
Okay.
So what's curious to me is, are we talking about actual errors, or are we talking about different ways of being different connections being made? Because when something's going from hydrophilic to hydrophobic, it's able to interact with other parts of the chromosome that it wasn't before being able to connect to or being able to be affiliated with, and affecting different. So I don't know if it's so much can be looked at. I mean, I don't know. I don't see it so much as an error in transcription as more like just you're sort of like taking trying to find the analogy. Right. Taking wires that were just on the outside, not connected to anything, and now you stuck these wires towards the inside of the chromosome, and now they can find different connections. Now they can be routed different ways. It's like taking an HDMI cable, trying to plug it into a Betamax VCR. Well, yeah, nothing's going to happen, and that just was the way it was. They didn't connect. But then you went back to the inside, and there's an HDMI slot that it can actually plug back into, because at some point the chromosome was connected, and then over 500,000 years, it went from hydrophobic to hydrophilic, and there was nothing going on. And now that it's back on the inside, oh, look, there's an HDMI connection again, and now I'm plugging in again when it hasn't been plugged in for 3 million years. But we're really making connections within the chromosome that once existed, but then there was manure, there was manipulation, and things moved around through the epigenetics, through mutation, whatever, and there was no connection. And now we're back to making these connections again.
Yeah, so when these things execute incorrectly because of, and that's only one part of it, like downstream of that is transcription errors that can occur because of this. And you get a transcription error because the RNA that bleeds off from this process, if you have, my understanding is if you have your hydrophilic code that's incorrect, and you get an RNA strand created from this that's not correct in the first place, when that RNA approaches the ribosome, and hopefully I got this right. Somebody will correct me if I'm not right, but the RNA, as it approaches the ribosome, the sequence of those nucleotides are going to be incorrect, and when it's processed through the ribosome, and the peptides shoot out the top of it to make a protein, that protein will not function correctly, and that could lead to cancer, that could lead to all sorts of things. And it all comes from that original chromatin remodeling balance on how things, how the DNA is wrapped around histones and the nuclear forces that affect it.
I found a couple of articles. You guys are thinking. My favorite city, Portland, as I have mentioned many times.
Kiki's new hometown.
Man, I want to make it my hometown. And well, here's one thing that Portland has done: a way of generating electrical power using their water supply. Would like to try.
Hey, I'll be right back.
Okay. I want to try to screen it. That didn't work. All right.
I have time for one more, Ed, and then I gotta cruise.
Okay.
Hydropower, right?
Okay.
Hydro
Oh, what the heck? We will end there. If I can ever figure out the screen share function. Okay. There we go. It won't. Ah.
There you go. Kinda.
The stupid thing won't enlarge. Hitting the enlarge button, ain't nothing happening. Oh well, you have to take my word for it. See that thing you can almost see? That's a set of turbines, and they put those turbines inside their water pipes, and it creates, it helps them create some of the energy they need for electrical power in Portland. Let's see. In Portland, one of the city's main pipes, they use these Lucid's pipes, that's the name of the thing, to make power that's sent into the grid. The system can't generate enough energy. While the system can't generate enough energy for the entire city, the pipes can power individual buildings like a school or library to help offset a city's total energy bill. Unlike wind or solar power, the system can generate electricity any time of day, regardless of the weather, since the pipes always have water flowing through them. So there's your basic idea. That's neat. That's creative.
That is neat.
That's what I like. That is what I like about Portland. Another great thing about Portland, and then you can go. And in fact, we'll end the broadcast. And if we sneak out of here fast enough, Justin will never know it.
Okay, well, that was awesome. That was fun. That was another good episode.
Oh, stupid screen shares. I can't do it. I failed. It's about what are called a food trolley. It's a vegetable truck. And the idea is there are people who are 10 miles from a fresh food market, let's say. So that it's difficult for them to get fresh foods. So what you got is the same guy I had in the 1940s in my neighborhood, the vegetable guy, who wheeled his little vegetables around the neighborhood. So the fresh produce came to you. And the key being fresh produce, not store-bought. This is stuff from your local farm, hopefully, and it's the farmer's market. It's a farmer's market on wheels. And this woman who started it, she makes enough money and she's expanding on it.
That's pretty cool.
That's what I like.
Innovation.
Innovation. All right. I will let you go. I will hang around.
Okay. Well,
I want to wait till Justin gets back. I don't want him to think all of a sudden he's done something wrong. In fact, I can do, huh?
Okay. Well, I'll talk to you later. I'm going to sign out, but
Okay.
Kyle, Ed, we'll talk to you next week and say goodbye to Justin for me.
Okay. I'll see you next week. Pamela may join us. Bye. Okay, Kyle. You got the room. You can finally talk. After everybody else was rambling along and you had to sit there, you can finally get a chance to say something.
Well, anybody who watches these broadcasts or the recordings, well, I talk a lot in the chat room more than I talk out here as well.
Okay.
I speak better when I write, even if I have bad grammar or bad punctuation.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that sometime I can actually connect to everybody and pop in. I connect. I analyze too much. I don't.
Can I know that you said you have a problem with your kidneys. No, I don't want to get too personal or anything like that. But
I did read something about the Mayo Clinic patients.
okay, that's what I would want to mention.
They do
Okay. Dale had to leave us. Justin.
I
We were
noticed
going to try to sneak out of here before you came back, and you'd come back and think, I broke the hangout. Yeah. We need, in Science Island, our school in Science Island, we need people like Dale to be our teachers.
Yeah, and this is part of the whole thing with Science Island too, is sort of choosing your neighbors. There is a little element of the society that is created by a bunch of, educated people, it's got to be better, right? It's got to be better than people, than a society made of people who have various levels of education and mythological beliefs. It's got to be right. It's just got to turn out better. Maybe not. Maybe it ends worse. Maybe it ends badly. But still, somebody needs to run that experiment.
Exactly. And you got to vetting. And when setting up a community like that, the most difficult task, once you find the site, is vetting people. Figuring out who do you want to accept, who do you not want to accept, or you just accept everybody, and it becomes a big experiment, and you find out, which kind of personalities don't work out so well. You find out about people who maybe are counterproductive in what you do about them. I don't know. Should it be just open?
I think that experiment's already been run in greater society, Ed.
That's true. That's true.
I think and then the way that we've chosen to separate them is based on economics. and it's really I don't know. Part of it is the pioneer thing, right? Part of it is the pilgrim thing, where you take a bunch of like-minded people and you put them on a boat and you sail them halfway across the planet or to some place where they can, forge their own land. And you try to create a society with the most amount of mutual agreement as the basis for starting it. Where it goes from there is probably going to follow every other societal downfall that's ever existed. But, the heyday is when you have the like-minded community. One of the interesting things, too, and talk about mythology, talk about people creating mythology around them, is like Minnesota.
That's where
their football team is the Vikings. Minnesota was created because they gave free land away at a time when a large portion of the new immigrants to the United States tended to be Swedish, but Scandinavian in general, but largely Swedish. And so they moved to Minnesota for the free land, where they could go farm on this fertile land. Well, the whole thing was sort of a scam, right? The land was free, that part was true. It might not have been the best farmland, right? Might not have actually been the most convenient place within the territories to homestead. But they sold travel plans. They had the general stores set up. They had, the people made money off of moving a large population of recent immigrants to Minnesota. And of course, Minnesota is where you hear about the legends of the ancient Nordic settlers, the Vikings, and the giant Vikings, and the Viking artifacts that are getting found, and none of it is, of course, true, but it completely fits with the people who happen to homestead there. The self-fulfilling prophecies are the easiest ones to sell to a larger population. But really, Minnesota may not have been so successful if it hadn't been a large group of like-minded, like-cultural, like-history, or whatever peoples who were populating it at the same time. And I think you can see this sort of evidence for this over and over throughout history, where there's this whole possible theory, and I don't know exactly where they're supposed to be from, but somewhere's the Cossack Mountains, I think, is where it comes from. And they were running into this population explosion problem, where there was just too many people. There was too many people for the amount of food they were producing. So they started this game thing. I don't know. It's convoluted, but anyway, if you're really good at winning at this particular dice game, call it, if you're really good at strategizing it, you won a chance to be part of a group that was going to go and colonize this promised land off to the west. And there's some theory that the people who left the Cossacks, who had won this strategy game, were going to a land that they thought already was predestined for them to create, may have been the ancient Greeks before they settled, and the ancient Romans before they settled. You know, so you have this group of strategic people who may have left the Cossacks to go and settle Greece and Rome. And then throughout history, look what happens. We get logic, we get imperialism, we get all these great and double-edged things that came from this. But what if this story, what if this mythology, what if this origin story is true, and it was very strategic, rational thinkers who had first settled in Greece? Well, then it sort of does explain all of that which came out of Greece afterwards.
Well, overpopulation has driven human migration from the very beginning. Yeah. I read what drove the Vikings out of Scandinavia was overpopulation.
I heard differently. I heard it was the women. I heard that it was just much more peaceful when the Vikings weren't at home. So they'd come home, they'd throw them this big feast, this big party, they'd celebrate them. They're like, you are now all legends. We're going to be speaking your names and stories across the country around the campfires. And oh, by the way, we've already resupplied your longboat. Yeah, you're ready to go again. Yeah. We did it. We all pitched in. Your longboat's ready to go. See you in another 6 months, right?
Okay, well, think of the British got rid of their convicts and they sent them to Australia, and that's what populated Australia with a bunch of convicts. That what took over from the native inhabitants was a bunch of convicts.
Yeah, a bunch of like-minded convicts, and then we get Australia, which makes sense today still.
And an interesting aside there was I've also read how the original women who came to Australia were prostitutes. But over time they evolved and they became this very refined sort of society sort of women and saw themselves as being these very refined society women looking down at the new immigrants when they were a bunch of prostitutes, etc. Who may be as refined more than aristocratic people, I don't know.
Yeah, well, you know, so there is already a science, there was once, I don't know if I could call it so much today. The city of Davis was very much a science island experiment. There was for decades a zero growth policy of the town, which meant they wouldn't build new housing. Just wouldn't build new housing. And because it all revolved around a university, you know, and it still to this day has like the highest per capita PhD in the state of California for the population. And then that's also touchy because then it's like, is it all the people who live here? Because do you really count the students? You know, they're not permanent residents here. They're students. They're basically transients. So it's basically all like the professors and the faculty and those around them that get counted, and not the students themselves, but whatever. Point of it is, though, this town has always been insulated from economic upturns and downturns. It's always had a very sort of progressive view towards things, and but it also has very restrictive building codes and the rest of it too. I don't know. I think part of the thing with Science Island isn't so much that you are trying to create an exclusive society. I envision that it would be open to the public, for instance, like people could just come and visit or whatever, that we would be doing sort of outreachy things. But I think at the core, I don't see a problem of choosing a founding father-esque ideology to be part of it. I don't see any kind of problem with wanting people to be pro-science and pro-rationalism, and even a little bit anti-religious in inviting them to be part of it. I think that's how it kind of has to start. I think where you would run into trouble is attempting to maintain that, attempting to keep it that way, attempting to dictate going forward the evolution of a science island. If it turned into Mythology Island, well, you know, then that's its natural course of events. But I think at the outset, you can at least choose your starting parameters and see then, follow then where that goes with a clear conscience. After the fact, you can't dictate. That's a two-end.
You can borrow from the British. What we can do is you start with that population. Would you have? You start off 156 Dunbar numbers. Okay, that's it. 156 people. Then you find out some of them people, I don't know, they're really not doing so much work right. So what you do is, just like the British do, except these are the belingerers or the people not or whatever not fitting into the society. You put them on that little boat or something, and you send them off to another sister island and start Science Island 2.
Oh, yeah.
That's how you do it.
Well, yeah, there's always the banishment card, right? There's always like, and I think I think there's some fairness about that when you're banishing somebody back to the United States. It's really soft landing. If we were actually on an island in the middle of the Pacific and you were setting somebody out on a pontoon, it's a little harsher, right? That's a little bit more like, we're sentencing you to death, yeah, we know, but we're just gonna call it sending you away, right? No.
Well, you talk about faith. Think about the Christopher Columbus and his crew. I mean, Christopher Columbus, at least, he was sure he was going to make a whole bunch of money, as did the Spanish. But the crew, they didn't know where the heck they were going. They're putting their faith in Christopher Columbus, and they're just going, and they're never coming back, I would think, at least in their mindset. They're going to see sea dragons or something. Man.
Yeah, I think there may have been a few attempted coups upon that journey.
They probably thought of it like Mars one way to Mars. Like you're not
Mars.
Yeah, you're not coming back from Mars unless they somehow create rocket technology or get a big crane and pull you up into the ship somehow.
That overpopulation. That's another thing I had on my agenda. I was thinking about this messy problem with overpopulation, and I can't think of how to get around religion as far as overpopulation. First, we have overpopulation. That kind of worked as long as you had wide areas that people could move into. The United States was kind of wide open. You had the nasty little Indians. We can take care of them. Lots and lots of space. You don't have lots and lots of space, except maybe in Antarctica or someplace like that. And maybe global warming will make that a nice place to visit at some point. So you got overpopulation, no place to put people. Indonesia, massive population. And so you need population control. I would think that's kind of logical. Scientifically, population control, and then you have people like the Pope. Now, the Pope's upset because places like Italy, the birth rate is falling. It isn't necessarily the overall population, but not enough young Catholics being born. So he comes out and says anybody who doesn't have children is selfish, that kind of thing. So you have the clash between the reality of overpopulation, economic problems, resulting in possible warfare.
Right. But
go ahead.
But I agree with the Pope.
Okay.
On this issue.
Okay.
Not that I think we need more Catholics, but I can completely relate. We need more people on Science Island having children. We need a larger population. We need to be better represented in the world. Like whatever your, affiliation is, you want more like-minded people on the planet. If you're Hindu, you might go, okay, I think we've done enough, right? But other than that, you want to be better. I want all of the people who I like and are friends with and know and who I appreciate. I want all of my smart, beautiful people to have children and raise more smart, beautiful people. And if you're, the Pope, you want more Catholics, and if you're the Ayatollah, you want more Iranian babies. Like this is just, I get it. I do get it.
I get it. And one of the things...
too is, part of it is a belief that we can sustain an overpopulation of whatever stretch of land that we have, you know, through ingenuity. Is that we could actually pull it off. You know, it's not about just basic subsistence farming. The idea would be to overproduce, actually to produce more than we consume, to export our product, because we can produce more than it takes for a human being, more than is required for a human being to merely subsist.
Modern farming techniques and technology, etc., we can grow lots and lots more food. Food should not be the problem. Jobs, that could be the problem. I mean, particularly once, again, well, education maybe can deal with that problem. Education, teaching people how to do technical jobs, the new jobs that are created are technical jobs. Maybe that's the solution. But man, you got a lot of people right now going to be put out of work, particularly with robotic technology that's happening fairly quickly.
And it was something you mentioned earlier that I didn't harp upon properly, which is it's not just, it's actually going forward, from what I can see, less and less manual labor is going to be taken over by automation. And I say that because I think most of manual labor has already been taken over by automation that can be. What the next wave, it's not even the next wave, it's already been underway.
That's true.
Is the educated fields. You know, do we really need, who really needs, forgive me, but who really needs an accountant when you've got computer software that you can punch in your data and it tracks everything? Who really needs, you know, a business manager to be in every store location when you can have one that can manage 30 stores with the click of a few buttons? You know, there's certain things that, you know, even legal advice. I mean, there's so many programs that you can subscribe to that will give you legal advice, that will set up your business for you, set up your accounting for you, like, there's so many fields that as we go forward, more and more of these so-called educated fields, you know, who needs an architect? I only know of one architect who I've ever met who actually works as an architect. All of them call themselves architects, but I've only met one that actually is working for people to design buildings. Most of them don't have work. You know, you look at the houses that go up. They have an architect that gets hired to make 5 houses, and then that is enough models for a 500 home tract. And then they're just pulling them out of the archive when they're doing the next development. Yeah, I don't know. I think when you talk about people having jobs, I don't think the jobs are important anymore. I think the ideal of Science Island would be, yeah, everybody's got a job that they're sort of in charge of, but it's not really a career job. It's more of like, all right, you've signed up to be part of the farming group, so here's what the farming tasks are, and this needs to be accomplished, and as a group you accomplish that goal. But really the focus is on education. Really the focus is on higher education and innovation. So it's not about simply maintaining Science Island, but it's about improving it. You know, whether that's through better engineering of our communications, of the electrical system, of the irrigation system, of the farming techniques. It might just be art. It might be just aesthetics. It could be design. You know, it's all these things that higher education does give people the ability to accomplish. That if we just are forced on replicating it for the masses, we don't move on. Science Island, part of it being small and nuclear little environment, is that once we've solved the problem, we don't really need to keep solving it over and over and over across a large population. Once you've come up with a better mousetrap, you don't go into mousetrap production. You've produced a better mousetrap, it's out, now we move on to something else.
Yeah, it isn't about production. Production shouldn't be the problem. It's about working on the experiment, working on the innovation, being creative. And I would say that's how our educational system has to evolve overall. I mean, it's kind of silly for somebody to spend, you know, I don't know how many years till they're 26-year-old getting a PhD, and they wind up with a PhD and they can't get a job.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't make any sense. So there was a play, and Meryl Streep was in it almost when she was very young, and she was at this exclusive school that was a sister school of the Ivy League, and all her sisters were talking about careers, and she was sitting down with the typewriter, and they said, "What the heck are you doing with a typewriter?" She said, "That's because I can get a really good job when I get out of here." Yeah. So it's becoming educated enough as a start, so then perhaps you could apprentice yourself. You can learn some skills so that you can put a roof over your head, food on the table, whatever. But you're always being re-educated. You're being re-educated into perhaps something you want to do, a craft the artist Dale was talking about, or inventing a new computer, a new algorithm, or what the heck. Now, it can't be going for an education and this is going to be your job and you're going to spend 20 years in school. That's not going to work.
Yeah. So this is also part of the idea of Science Island, though, or at least the vision I have of it. First of all is once the land is paid for, and I know I've mentioned this a few times, the sort of rent-freeness of it all. I think that's an element that would be really liberating. If you got the 156? Did you say 156 members who aren't working to pay the mortgage and working to pay this, but have sort of that freedom to be flexible with where they were applying their education or their work. You know, to go out and freelance work, to go work on projects of passion or interest, and then sort of bring back what's learned from that back to the island is sufficient too. So I like the idea of people being able to sort of use the island also as the touchstone, as the home base of operations, where you go out and you consult for this company, you work on this development project, you work in this experimental arena, you go do this media gig, whatever it is, and then you come back at the end of the week, the month, the year, the whatever, however long you've been gone. I like the idea of having a leaping off platform for, you know, education-minded or creative-minded people. I think that's what's sort of missing in our society. Because so much of why people take dead-end jobs is based on just the survival necessity, the economic necessity. Part of the Science Island ideology or idea would be remove a big part of that economic necessity from people's lives. Yeah. So I don't think most people would be working on Science Island, but it would free them up to pursue the type of work that they really would want to do. Which might mean we end up with nothing but actors.
I sort of kind of agree with you, but I wouldn't want Science Island to become like a bedroom community, just a place where people go to live in. I would want it to be a place where people are interacting and working on projects together. Mm-hmm. I would agree. You've got to have turnover. You need fresh blood every once in a while. So I like your idea that, you know, I do this thing on Science Island for a while and I'm successful, and then I go off someplace else and somebody replaces me and brings in fresh ideas or whatever. You do need that turnover. That's true. That's true. That I agree with. But I wouldn't want it to become like a bedroom community that just a place where people have their homes.
No, and I agree with that too. But I think that would be, again, there'd be various levels of. So I sort of see it like, okay, went and worked on this project for 6 months in South America, trying to figure out a clean water system for this regionally rural group of people. Then they came, and then, you know, come back to Science Island, and maybe I'm only going to be there for 3 months, but then I'm there for those 3 months, contributing to the community, getting involved in the ongoing projects, maybe bringing somewhat of what I've just learned about this rural irrigation project I work on back to Science Island. So there's an element of, there's always a core group of people who are there maintaining and working the island, and there's this sort of influx of spare time between education or project people who are coming in and out. I think it's sort of, I sort of see part of it also being able to be open as a working hostel. Hostel? Is that what it is? Hostile? Not hostile. Hostel. Right? So you could have even international student set who are vacating to the United States, using this as a place of $10 a day rent while they're staying on the island, and then contributing a little bit of, you know, sweat equity into working on a project, that sort of thing. So there's like a whole bunch of different ways of including turnover group, you know, transient groups, turnover groups, somewhat bedroom community groups too. To me, I always think that that's where I'd be the most effective. I don't think I'd stop being a car salesperson. But the difference is, you know, I've got this place that's paid for already that I'm not paying rent for. So that $1,000 a month that I was spending on rent now goes to adding a new solar panel a month to the grid of the community, or that adds another hangar over a course of 6 months, or a new greenhouse or something. You know, I sort of see it also as there's a benefit to having the outside income source that affords those things that we wouldn't be building ourselves. You know, like I don't remember who was talking about it most recently, but the large greenhouses, like these large glass greenhouse structures, that we could have a bunch of those that could be, you know, climate controlled and monitored for you know, those things cost money. So instead of everything being a do-it-yourselfer project, there could be large projects that are accomplished by the outside income. I mean, I always pictured this too. Like if I'd had a one piece of property from the first day I, you know, started in the working world till now, you know, and if I just added 1 or 2 elements to this sort of garden in the back, what an amazing sort of structure or environment I could have created over, you know, 20 plus years of working. Like, it seems like having a place to pour those resources that are otherwise wasted on banks or landlords, or, you know, to have a place to funnel those where it creates and adds to a communal shared benefit to your community each month. I don't know, I love that idea. I love that idea. And I think it does require a mix of people who are doing that and people who, okay, great, so Ed just bought us, Ed was out there working, Ed bought us another solar panel. Well, now we got to somehow find a way to integrate it to the system. Like, there's people who are actually, you know, doing the stuff on the island, but I think it would also require people on the outside who are putting in the financial backing for the improvements. If we're talking about building something, if I win the lottery and get $500 million, screw it, we just all hang out on the island. In fact, we'll just vacation the Caribbean and call it good, right? Like,
well, the whole idea of Science Island, to me, it's not about survival. I know some of the people, it's about outreach, certainly, and it's about experiments. Mm-hmm. Experiments and outreach. So whatever we're doing, we're trying to take something and make it better. That's the experiment part of it. And certainly outreach, and outreach means people going outside the community and people from outside the community coming in. So that would be a big dynamic as far as Science Island goes. performing experiments within the island and reaching out to the community outside the island saying, hey, look how we did this. This works better. You know, maybe you could try it.
Yeah, and you're going to see very, very little of that taking place anywhere else. I mean, you know, the idea that you could create the Science Island village, as it were, and have a gardening system, a water collection system, and a gardening system that supports each other. There's no call for it. There's no ability to do that anywhere in our regular society. I mean, there is no community that's going to go up. There's no new neighborhood that's going to get built that's going to do it on a principle like this. You know, it has to be. You're not going to get building permits as a developer to create a water collection system off-grid. You're just not. You're not going to get your funding from your bank. You're not going to get your permits from the city. It's something that you have to just go out and do yourself. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is, you're right, that is a big part of it. It is that sort of lead by example, you know, look what could be done if you did things a different way. There's the Earthship Biotexture folks have been doing that a little bit. Unfortunately for them, they're basically doing this like in Tucson, Arizona, and parts of New Mexico where it's just god-awful desert.
Yeah, people are creating Science Island sort of kind of like communities.
Yeah.
But it's
and
not
then there's just basic
nationwide.
Right across the street here is the N Street commune complex.
Mm-hmm.
It's now made up of I want to say maybe 10 houses, and it's an interesting street because what is it? So the intersection here is it's kind of U-shaped, right? The street, right? I mean, it goes off in different ways, but they've got this street that sticks out, and like I'm here, my house is right here, and across the street there's a street here and there's a street here, and all the houses along this street on both sides are owned by this commune. So they've torn down all the fences. These are just normal houses that were already there. But they, over time, bought this, added that one, bought another one. Every time one went up for sale over the last few decades, has been buying up the houses. So both sides of this street going down are owned by this commune. So what they've done is they've torn out all of the fences. You know those normal fences that everybody's got that go 10 to 20 feet behind their house? They've all been torn down. They've all been completely removed. And there's farms in there, there's some playgrounds for the kids, there's a little stage they've set up on one side so they can have like bands come and play, small, you know, and they've eliminated some of the kitchens. They do a lot of the communal kitchen cooking. So by eliminating kitchens from half of the houses, they've also made the, you know, more space in the homes. Pretty brilliant thing that's been going on for years and years and years, and as a very successful experiment here. So there's you know, pooled resources and benefits to community that work, and I guess we were talking, you know, about like creator space kind of a thing too. Mm-hmm. If you pool the resources for tools, you can have bigger and better and cooler tools to do neat things with, to do more creative things with.
Yeah, my generation, our goal in getting a job. My goal in getting a job was finding a place that'll pay me enough money to put a roof over my head, food on the table, and a good pension. I'm gonna have a good pension. I'm gonna stay at this place for 30 years, which is what I did, and I'm gonna wind up with a nice pension and company-paid cheap health insurance. Okay, that's gone. That's dead. Pension plans going away. Health insurance plans going away. So that you got to reinvent society, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And that means, you know, that means probably getting work that you're really enthusiastic about, so you're going to be really good at it. Because you're going to have to be really good at it because there's going to be 1,000 other people who want your job. You know? So it's going to encourage people getting the kinds of jobs eventually do you really, really like and are good at.
Yeah, and also having the flexibility to get out of a job as the whatever sector it is that you're in is starting to get that either the downsize pressure or the race to the bottom mentality thing going on. So, you know, I would hope that having an education source, it's sort of like living on campus almost. It's sort of pictured as something as a mini university. And being able to venture out and work and then venture back in and re-educate, venture back out and work and venture back in and re-educate. But having that safety net of being able to go to the place where you can go and re-educate again. That's what we lack to a large extent, I think, in this society. Because you're right, it's not going to be one career path or one industry that takes you from beginning to end in your career anymore. It's going to be a series of re-educations. It's going to be a series of doing this while it's hot or while you're enthusiastic about it and then moving on again.
And the idea of one home, one place you're going to spend the rest of your life in. That was the idea when I was growing up. First thing you did, well, you got life insurance, first of all, and you wanted to save up some money so you can buy your own home, and then you build on that home, and you live in it for the rest of your life. I don't think that's not how people live anymore, can live anymore, because jobs move around, so they got to move around. We're nomads. We're going to become
going back to the nomadic
nomads. You know? You lived in a teepee? You actually lived in a teepee type thing for a while, you mentioned?
So this is my uncle, who was a mountain man. He was also a miner. So
mountain man and miner? Where did you go
he would
up?
go out and he'd work these like silver mines, gold mines, uranium mines, and he would do this for, you know, X amount of months out of the year until he made enough money that he didn't really care about work anymore. And then he would go and this the teepee was one. So working these mines, he'd go out to these mine sites, and these mine sites were usually located at the ends of these logging roads. It was loggers. I guess the mine must have been discovered first somehow, and then they built a road out to it. And once the road was built out to it, the loggers would go out there and use the road too to access this lumber that was around the mine site. And whoever owned the property made a bunch of money leasing it out. But anyway, because he knew these logging roads that led to a mine eventually, they were out in the middle of the Sierra wilderness nowhere. Nobody else lived out there. Nobody else used these roads. So he'd go out there as his mountain man side between mining gigs and just live off the land. He'd bring up enough resources and food, whatever, and yeah, literally he had an 18-foot pole teepee he'd set up, which I think had like a 25, 30-foot radius around the thing. It was huge inside. And he would just live like that. He would bathe in creeks and river.
That I don't know about. I'm not bathing in no creek.
Cold water. Not for. But he was a bear of a guy, and this is how he lived. And then yeah, one time, I mean, we did that a few times, and then there was another time when he was homesteading, and there was a nice, I don't know, nice. It was a 3-bedroom wood cabin with like you know, the heater was a fire-fed stove or whatever, iron stove. But we were staying there, and then at some point, he decided that we weren't roughing it enough. So yeah, we'd go out and we'd set the teepee up out in the middle of nowhere again, even though we had the nice cabin this time. Yeah, still, let's go back to the teepee, and we'd be out there for a couple months. And he also thought this is also the uncle that would take on what do you call it, Mustangs from the Bureau of Land Management relocation program.
Mm-hmm.
This guy was a munitions guy in the Marines who turned out to a miner. He was the guy that put the powder in the hole that made it blow up. Yeah, he knew not. This man knew nothing about horses to begin with, but became really good at breaking them to a certain extent. These wild Mustangs we would get. So then we'd be riding around these like half-broken horses that at any minute could just decide to turn feral again and start bucking us off or rubbing us up against trees. There's always a sense of adventure that even our horse under us wasn't necessarily that trusty steed. Like it was, we'd be taking these horse rides out in the middle of the wilderness, and me or one of the cousins would get bucked off, and the horse would just take off, and then we're, two of us on a horse instead of one on each. But yeah, they were good times growing up.
And not just living for today. Again, that's what my generation was programmed for. Living for today, living for the future, really not living for today, living for the future. Your idea was you're going to work hard, who cares if you don't like your job, and then when you retire, you can enjoy yourself. So, yeah. And again, although we're going to be living longer, how much of a problem is, if we're going to be living longer and we don't control our population, the only answer I see is space.
Yes, retirement homes on the moon.
I don't know.
It's much less humid than Florida, and drier than Arizona.
I absolutely believe that's the ultimate. I mean, that's ultimately what we're programmed for. We're adventurers. I mean, we are nomads. We're people who moved out of Africa, and we're we got stuck into city mode when we invented agriculture, and city-states and things evolved. But adventure, traveling, move, that's in our DNA.
Yeah.
And the only place we got now is, once we conquer Antarctica, is going to be space.
And Antarctica, I think, is a bad move. If global, I don't know that there's a landmass below Antarctica. I think that all of that ice may be floating.
I don't know. Good point. I'm guessing there's a landmass, but I got no idea how big it is.
I don't think there's a landmass. I know. Greenland's got the landmass. It's not as much as it looks like today, but it's got a landmass under it. I'm not so sure Antarctica has a there. Maybe there is. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. Okay, let's figure this out. You got the geologies, and you got all these plates, and you got the continents and things rolling on these plates. Antarctica's one of them, isn't it? And if you're moving on that plate, does it need a landmass below it, or?
I mean, does it necessarily? But what I'm saying, is it necessarily? Okay, so then, yeah, eventually down there's a landmass. But is it even above sea level today?
Oh, I doubt that.
Yeah. So I mean, as that thing melts, it may not be above sea level anywhere.
Okay. Actually, you're probably right, since the sea level is going to rise.
No, it could. Yeah, no, it could. It could just collect snowfall and just be smaller but taller.
Okay, Justin, I'm running out of something else you want to talk about. Some fascinating subject. I'll hang around. I love discussing stuff.
No, I think I'm done too.
My mind is. I can't think of anything particularly new to talk about.
I think you did a good job tonight, though. This is another fun conversation.
Oh, yes, very definitely. And next week we'll get Pamela. Now we get 2 people. It's kind of hard. You get 3 people. Dale, I don't know. Dale's got an actual job where he has to use his brain. He's an engineer at a TV station. So I don't know how long he can last. But you get me, you, and Pamela, and then that's where you get the 4 or 5 hour hangout, I think.
Yeah, that's where it just keeps going. Well, it's already. I mean, what time is it where you are? It's at 1:40 in the morning, almost 2.
1:40 in the morning. Now we had. In fact, I am not on Chrome. Chrome crashed. Every time I started a Hangout, Chrome crashed. I actually had to go back to Internet Messenger. I've never used it. It was on my computer when I bought it. I had to go to Internet, I don't know, Explorer, in order to get from there back to Chrome, back to Google Plus to open up the Hangout. It's, we didn't start this till sometime after like 11 o'clock. It was like an hour and a half just to get the stupid Hangout open because I couldn't figure out how to do it. So we've actually been in the Hangout maybe 2.5 hours.
It's as long as I've been here almost. I've been here like 2 hours.
Yeah, just about. Actually, you're right. You came on about, we got into a couple of science stories. You shut off, and then I went into the religion science thing, and which is what a main topic I wanted to talk about anyway. And there we went. And actually, that's kind of how I see this, because on TWIS, you get science. You get talking about science, and we can talk about science here, but the different thing here would be discussions. We can sit here and discuss stuff for a half an hour or an hour, and that's the difference, as I see it, between this Hangout and TWIS.
Yeah, I also appreciate there's also you've got a different mix of people, it seems like, quite often kind of showing up and adding in their perspectives too. That's pretty fun.
Yeah, and I wanted to get Blair in because I wanted to talk about outreach, which is exactly what she does. She's involved in education, educating kids. That's exactly what she does.
Just every time you're starting a Hangout, send her like some form of
I send her an invite.
Social media invite.
I do that.
Okay.
I send her an invite. Well, I didn't do that until this week.
Yeah, last week I thought to call her like right about this time.
And then you were talking.
Oh,
and I said,
Blair, how are you?
Yeah. Okay, Justin. I will.
All right, I'll see you maybe next week.
Okay.